Hey, John Laffer here again, and this is going to be my second theory on psychological, physiological lifespan development, and I have chosen Erikson. So we are going to talk about him, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to kind of uh, show you a picture. Um, as I mentioned earlier, my computer broke at the very last minute, and so yeah, I hope you enjoy this. I will try to make it as fun and enjoyable and creative as possible. All right, thank you. Okay, so this is going to be the basic kind of outline as to Erikson. He proposed a psychoanalytical theory that explored the developmental stages throughout life. So, as you can see, I'm going to kind of explain this graphic. He included stages of childhood, adulthood, ultimately old age. So unlike Maslow's theory, Erikson's theory has 8 stages. So Maslow's got kind of a hierarchy of 5. Erikson's got 8 stages that he developed a little bit later in the 1950s. So the 8 stages are a little bit more detailed. They're a little bit more in depth. They kind of provide the psychological, psychosocial, environmental impacts. A little more detailed influence to contribute to the development of an individual. So, with a lot of practice and assertion, one can definitely kind of use this as a guideline through life, and that is really the end goal, is to master all 8 of these stages and live what would be considered like a healthy, happy, fulfilling life. So the difference with Erikson is he kind of established this tool as there's like a crisis in each stage of life that an individual has to experience and go through. He actually is termed by many people, consider him to have developed the term identity crisis, because that's kind of what all of his 8 stages implore, is the fact that there's a crisis in each one of them. So the first stage, which we're going to show right here in infancy, is trust versus mistrust. So that usually occurs at year 1 of infancy, at the stage establishing hope. That's the main goal. So it's strongly dependent on the parents' involvement. A real life example of this would be like playing hide and seek. Usually a lot of times parents will play hide and seek with their kids, and they kind of develop that initial trust or mistrust. If you play it correctly with your child, you're going to see that your kid expects that kind of toy to come back after a while. They start to gain the realization that, okay, mommy's taking this toy away, but she'll bring it back. It's not going to be gone forever. And if you don't properly establish that trust versus mistrust stage with your young child, your infant, there's going to be a lot of problems that could coincide later on in life. Your child could have negative behaviors such as fear, suspicion. You're basically laying an unstable ground, an unstable foundation for future development if you don't pay close attention to that infancy stage. So in early childhood, which kind of portrays the second stage of development, that's anatomy versus shame and doubt. So this is going to be really important too, because at this stage, it's usually at age 2, the child's going to begin to portray a sense of independence. So it's in a real life scenario would be, children walking away from their parents, or going to pick whatever toy they want to play with and not listening to mom or dad. They kind of gain that source of independence and like a self-will. If this isn't properly initiated during one of the most important developmental stages of a child's life, your child will get like a negative self-esteem. They need encouragement, they need support, they need help from their caregivers, whether it's biological parents or adoptive parents or foster parents, whoever it may be. They need to establish their own ability, and they need patience and guidance. So step 3 is going to be, like it says right here, in the preschool years, initiative versus guilt. This is usually years 3 to 5. It's classified, it's really extremely critical. So in this stage, this is where cognitive and behavioral development of a child are tested, they're developed. The ability of a child to advance from stage 2 to 3, its character traits that, are going to further be implemented in farther stages. So, they're going to ask a lot of questions growing up, and they're going to kind of establish their role as a leader, if that's their role. They are going to be playing, interacting with other children, and find their sense of purpose. So they're going to need a lot of positive reinforcement from those that were closest. And if they don't receive the proper execution of the support and love that they need, they're going to be a lot slower to develop. They might be considered annoying by their friends. They might even just be established as a follower and not a leader. So it's really important that, they don't leave this stage or experience that stage with a sense of guilt. You want them to have a sort of motivation, a sense of initiative, and a sense of purpose. Moving on to the school age, middle childhood, that's the fourth stage right over here. That's going to be industry versus inferiority. That's usually between the ages of 6 and 12. It becomes more important, after the aforementioned topics that we've already discussed. So this is where a middle childhood looks for the reinforcement from their parents or their caregivers. They can start acting out in ways that they've been, taught, or they've seen on television or through different role models of their life, and they need reinforcement to know if the decisions they're making are the right decisions or if they're not the right decisions. A lack of reinforcement can set the child up for failure in later stages again. You're going to have a child with low self-esteem, and you're going to lay a really rocky foundation for your child to kind of establish themselves. So it's really, really important in these years of 6 to 12 that this child kind of either finds themselves and, goes along with what, growing up is, or they're going to feel inadequate on many different levels. One of the most important levels, I think, is the fifth step here. And that's, it's adolescence. In my opinion, the fifth step, it's ages 12 through 18. It's going to definitely be adolescence. That's going to be identity versus role confusion. And this is one of the most important, in my opinion, because it requires the most attention to detail out of any step so far. Basically, this is where a child finds themselves. And if they are unable to find themselves, they are going to be confused as to who they are. They're going to ask that question: who am I? What do I want to do with my life? And this affected me personally a lot because I wasn't really given the opportunity to go through these stages. And so when I got to this stage in my life, it was really hard to identify who I was. I was raised by a single mother who worked a lot and wasn't there to provide, the fatherly figure or the information needed to really figure out who I was. So I still hold lots of role confusion to this date because of that. I'm 31 years old now in college for the second time, trying to find out myself, trying to figure out what I really want. So I'm not confused anymore, because I was for a long time. So, and that's what's important with these stages is, there's a tool that's given to you to kind of set a pace as to what age you're supposed to go through each stage, but life happens. And, no one, right or wrong, can dictate what stage you go through at what time. So it's really important to remember when you get to that step to try to identify yourself and not be confused about who you are. The sixth step is going to be emerging adulthood. This is kind of going to be, it's intimacy versus isolation. So it's going to be right down here. And this is going to be kind of where, now hopefully you've kind of found yourself, you know what you want to do, and you know where to go from here. Now you have that set in your mind, and you're going to try to find somebody to love. You're going to try to find that connection with somebody that's going to be strong, and that's one of the most important things is trying to find love, that sense of belonging, like we talked about in Maslow's hierarchy. It's really hard because love can be different for so many people, and you might think that you find love and then you get hurt. Somebody breaks your heart, so then you isolate yourself, and that can be a negative outcome of this stage as well. So you really kind of have to go into this with a mature mindset, and and that's why they say 18 to 40 is when this happens, because and it can happen earlier in your mind, but this is when you really start to discover what love is, and you really start to kind of set your boundaries as to what you're going to accept for love. And you need love to move on to the next stage. You need this if you're going to want to start a family, get a house, which is in the later steps here, and kind of progress as a successful, happy, healthy human. So the 7th step here, that's going to be ages 40 to 65. It's going to be kind of like middle adulthood, and that's the generativity versus stagnation. So this is kind of, it's imperative to the success of the 8th stage. In this stage you find confirmation for the choices you've made along all these other steps. It's going to kind of be that thing where you wonder if you made a difference in this life. So you want to know, you search for confirmation. You want to make sure your life was meaningful. And you kind of want to see if you're just a walking generality, or if you're stagnant, if you didn't accomplish anything. And that's what leads so vastly into the later stages of adulthood, because then you have your ego integrity versus despair. So if you leave this stage, quote unquote, in your retirement age to death, which 65 to death, and you get into that 8th stage and you have all these regrets, and you've experienced guilt, and you've experienced role confusion and inferiority to everybody else, and you don't trust anybody, and you've got shame and